Thank you very much. I appreciate this invitation. This is really fun, and you are way more fun than my students at 9 a.m. in the morning. So I'm used to big crowds. I teach an introductory class at Central, and our largest classes are usually around 100. But it's also fun to teach smaller groups, and I get to teach upper division classes that have smaller groups in it. So I have my own Super Bowl story, because obviously that's what we're all doing right now, is we're doing Super Bowl. When I was talking to my department chair about this presentation, he said, "Did you notice what Tom Brady said?" And I said, "No, because I don't watch him, because I watch the other side." And he told me to go look it up. And Tom Brady, after the millionth time of being asked about Deflategate, said to the press, "This is not ISIS. Nobody is getting hurt." Well, this is ISIS. I get to talk about ISIS today. Nobody will get hurt in this room, but obviously many people around the world are getting hurt. So this is a kind of a hard topic to cover. When you teach geography of the Middle East, it's not always pretty. But it is, as a geographer, it is really interesting to look at this from a geographic perspective. So I'm going to start here with my first slide. I think it's important that we set the stage for what I believe and what I think most people believe about this topic as a whole. And this quote came from the Japanese Prime Minister a couple of days before the two Japanese hostages were killed. And he said, "Extremism and Islam are completely different things." And that is where I want to start from. We are talking about extremists. We are not talking about the entire Muslim community. And I think it's very important that we set the stage for that at this point. All right? So, ISIS is the topic that I was assigned, and you will notice that I have IS next to it, which means Islamic State. I'm going to explain that in a minute. And it is going to be from a geographer's approach. Now, most people say, what on earth is geography? Because it's not taught in the schools anymore. It's social studies. So there's my pitch for that one. So any teachers we have here, we'd love to talk to you about getting geography back in the schools. At Central, we have a huge geography department. There's about 11 of us. We teach thousands of students. Maybe some of them have been your students, your kids. And as a human geographer, my approach is to try and explain the relationship between the land and people. And as a political geographer, I throw in politics and the land as well. And so I'm really interested in people and the land that they inhabit. And so that's the perspective that you're going to get from me today. I am not a physical geographer. So ISIS has become synonymous with all those horrible words that I have up there on that slide. Stonings, massacres, burying alive. You know, you've seen it all on the news. And just recently, the horrific act that was carried out on the Jordanian pilot. Now, the thing that we have to keep in mind, for most of us, this seems senseless. This just doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever. But for ISIS, it does make sense. And it makes sense because it's a conscious decision. It's a conscious decision to terrorize enemies and impress and co-opt new recruits. This is intentional. They intend to terrorize, and they, from that, expect to be able to co-opt people to come and join them, and they've been able to do that. It's kind of interesting. There's a story that Osama bin Laden used to tell, and he used to say, when people see a strong horse and a weak horse, by nature, they will like the strong horse. And so for al-Baghdadi, who runs ISIS, he is saying to you, through his terrorist activities, and signaling to his friends, we are the strong horse. That is what he is trying to do. And he says, get out of the way or you will be crushed, join our caravan, and make history. So we have to start from that perspective. That is what these people are after. That is what they want to do. Now, when I teach Middle East geography or any kind of geography and we're talking about the Middle East, there are a lot of words that we use that people potentially might not be 100% familiar with. So I'm going to spend a couple of seconds on these words, and then I will be using them as we talk. So this is how I would approach it in a classroom. So Islam is the religion, and a Muslim is a person who follows that religion. Those are two things that people often mix up. And so you don't call somebody an Islam, you call them a Muslim. That's the first thing that you need to know. The word Allah, many people think that means an Arabic God, a Muslim God. It is just the Arabic term for God. It doesn't mean a specific God, it just means God. And so if you were a Christian in the Middle East speaking Arabic, you would use that same terminology. Sharia is Islamic law. And Islamic law can cover everything from personal to government stuff. It is a series of laws, and some countries use that as the law of their country, and some people just adhere to it as part of their religion. And for this group that we're talking about, they would like to see Sharia law instituted as they see it for everybody, that is how the world needs to be run. Then there's the Sunni and Shia divide, and many people are not familiar with that either. Within Islam, there are two main branches, the Sunnis and the Shias. The Sunnis make up about 85% of Muslims, and the Shia make up about 15%. The Sunnis believe that essentially anyone could have followed the Prophet as the leader. The Shias believe that it had to be somebody who was related to the Prophet. And this all stems from the fact that the Prophet, according to most Muslims, did not designate a leader when he died or before he died. And so ever since then, the community has been fighting over who should be in charge. And that's essentially what this ISIS thing is all about. It's about who should be in charge. Should the Sunnis be in charge? Should the Shia be in charge? Now, there are various different groups of Sunni Muslims and various different groups of Shia Muslims, and they all have their own ideas and beliefs. ISIS is one of those extremist Sunni groups. Then there's the term Alawite, and because we are talking about Syria a lot, that has to come in too. Alawite is an offshoot of Shia Islam. Assad in Syria is an Alawite. The majority of the population in Syria are Sunni. And those Sunnis in Syria would like to depose Assad, and we know some of the reasons for it. He and his father have not always been the nicest of people, and the Sunni feel that they have been put out on the side by Assad and his regime and want rid of him. Couple more words, Jihad. To most of you, it means holy war, and we'll talk about that a little bit. It's basically the concept of establishing Islam, and we'll look at that. And then Caliphate. That's the big word that we associate with ISIS. Caliphate is a Muslim government, and essentially what they want to do is establish a Muslim government actually throughout the world, but they'll start with the Middle East. And it would be based on Sharia law. So those are some of the basic words that we have to look at. Where we have to go here is this modern Sunni-Shia conflict. Iraq's sectarian problems aren't about relitigating the 7th century disputes. They're about modern political power and grievances. That's what's going on here. So if you look at this map is from 2012, and so the numbers are a little low, but it'll give you an idea. We have the countries and what percentage of their population is Shia Muslim. And you can see that Iran is right at the top of that list. But right next to it there is Iraq. And as you can see from that, about 70% of Iraq's 33 million people are Shia Muslim. But when Saddam Hussein was in power, he was a Sunni. And he and the Sunnis that lived there were not particularly nice to the Shia. They spread a very wrong ideology of the fact they said that there were more Sunnis than there were Shias in Iraq. And so the Shias felt that they did not get represented properly. After the Gulf War and after the toppling of Saddam Hussein, it became apparent that with a democracy, the Shia would then be in charge. And as a result of that, Nouri al-Maliki became the leader of Iraq, a Shia. And he did the exact same thing as Saddam Hussein did, essentially, but this time to the Sunnis. So today, everybody is upset. And the Sunnis and the Shias are not happy with each other. The Sunnis feel that they are underrepresented in Iraq, and they feel also in Syria that they are underrepresented. And so the two groups do not get along. And that's the basis of this problem. And so in comes a group called ISIS, although its name has changed dramatically, and we'll look at that. And they're filling a nice big vacuum there and helping other Sunnis understand their grievances and help them right their grievances against the Shia of Iraq. So, name changes. You've seen a lot of them. They were AQAI, which is Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They then rebranded themselves in 2007 as ISI, which is Islamic State in Iraq. But when they saw Syria descend into civil war, they saw an opportunity, another vacuum that they could use. And so al-Baghdadi, who by this time becomes the leader of ISIS, decides to rebrand themselves one more time and move to Syria. And so he rebranded them as IS, Islamic State. Prior to that, they'd also, and you will hear our government refer to them as ISIL, referring to the Levant, the region that they are located in. All these names have some kind of particular connection to the past or what they intend for the future. So today, IS, Islamic State, which is the correct term, but it's really hard for me to use that. I use ISIS all the time just because that's the one I'm most comfortable with. ISIS and Al-Qaeda compete, and Al-Qaeda is what they came from, another Sunni Muslim group, over Islamist extremist groups to influence them. They want to influence the other groups. And so they are in a fight for influence. So you'll notice in France, when we had the killings at the magazine in France, Al-Qaeda took credit. In other words, look what we can do. They wanted to be seen and be heard. So you will see this flag. This is the flag of ISIS, or IS, Islamic State. And this dates back to the 8th century in the second dynasty of Islam, the Golden Age. And I teach about this in my class, about when Islam pretty much had the advantage in the world. When the rest of the world was in the Dark Ages, Islam had light and books and all kinds of things. And so it dates back to this time period. And at that time, they also used a black banner or flag. On this flag is what's called the Shahada. And the entire writing reads, "There is no God but God. Muhammad is the messenger of God." And that is what they put on their flag. The white circle is supposed to represent the seal of the Prophet Muhammad, though nobody really knows what it looked like. And it is intended to evoke the image of historical Islamic caliphates that ISIS itself claims to have resurrected. That is what they think. And so when we look at the flag that ISIS has, or Islamic State, there's many flags that look very similar. Not always black, but you can see in the top left a group from Syria, in the center a group from Somalia, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, the Caucasus, which is the area by Russia, Saudi Arabia with the green flag, and many different Hamas, Boko Haram. These are all groups that you've heard of, I am sure. And so their flags have that representation. And interestingly enough, that black banner shows up in modern day flags of regular states as well. So the black in these flags represents Islam and represents the Islamic age. That's what they're doing when they put that in their flag. So here we see a graphic of an Islamic fighter, an Islamic State fighter with his flag. And as you can maybe see, I don't know if the writing is big enough for you to see there, this is the quote from one of these people. "Know that we are men who fear no one. We will institute the laws of Allah. May He be exalted and praised." This is what they think they're doing. They think they are praising Allah. Most Muslims, 99.99% of them, would not agree. But this is their extremist take. The raised finger gesture refers to what's called the Tawhid, which is the oneness of God, meaning that there is one God. In other words, it's a monotheistic religion, and that Muhammad is his prophet. But it is also used and interpreted by Islamic State to refer to their fundamentalist interpretation, which rejects any other view of Islam, including just about every other Muslim that exists. And that's what you need to remember, and that's why I put the first slide up. They reject most Muslims. I was listening to a radio station this morning, and they were talking about why would they kill a Sunni Muslim. They are Sunni, why would they kill a Sunni? And the reason for that is that they say, the Shias are heretics, everybody knows that, and we'll get to them. But a Sunni knows better. And if a Sunni is not adhering to what we believe, then he too deserves to die. That's what this group is about, all right? They are extremists. And so they will do whatever it takes. Their goal is to establish an Islamic caliphate. And the purple kind of represents what it was back in the Golden Age, and so that's what they're headed for. They intend to establish this caliphate using Jihadi Ideology, which is what I've been explaining, which basically tells us that they reject any other version of Islam and accept their own, and they are determined to establish their version no matter what. The group condemns as apostates virtually all Muslims who don't agree with them. And so their main struggle starts with getting rid of the Shia. That's where they're going. And they will also kill all Sunnis who are, in their estimation, apostate. The far enemy is us. And at this point, they have said, we are not interested in dealing with the far enemy. They want to deal with Shias first. Then once they've accomplished all of that, they'll come after us. But at this point, that is what their goal is. Now, jihad is a difficult word, and as I said, many people think it's a holy war. It is not one of the 5 pillars of Islam, which is the basic tenets of Islam. But it essentially, to some, is a war to protect Islam. But what I want to explain is that most Muslims see this word referring to a personal striving to right oneself with God. I have lots of Muslim friends, students who have come to the university from other countries, and I have sat and I have visited with them. And to them, jihad means nothing like what ISIS and many other people might say. To most Muslims, it's about, do I fast on Ramadan? Do I pray 5 times a day? Do I do what I profess to believe? That's what jihad means to most Muslims. The leader is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Abu Bakr is a nod to the Islamic prophet, Muhammad's father-in-law. He was the first caliph, so he says he's a caliph. Now he's naming himself after the first caliph. And he's not from Baghdad, even though he calls himself Baghdadi. That's not his real name. That's just what he's used. He was arrested and placed in Camp Bucca for a while, and that's been described by some as a summer camp for terrorists, where he made friends, learned stuff, and came out of that, with one of his friends being the person that does all his audiovisual kind of spokesman type stuff. This is the area that they occupy at this point in time, and if you have no idea what that means, it's about the size of Maryland. All right, that's the amount of territory that they occupy. So the next question is, can ISIS take Iraq? Because they are trying to. And many people say no. Even though the Iraqi army is a mess, but much bigger, ISIS cannot take it. And part of that is because the Sunnis are in the north, and they might support ISIS. But in the south, they're Shia, and they won't support ISIS. So that would limit ISIS expansion in this area. The U.S. has been leading the bombings. We've been hearing about that. The question is, what are we doing? We're trying to support moderates on the ground. You probably heard that we offered money or aid to Jordan to help them. So is it working? Some people say it's helping. Some people say it's not. We'll see where that goes. Who are the extremists killing? They're killing themselves. ISIS has killed more Muslims than anybody else. They are killing each other, is what they are doing. And where are their people coming from? All over the map. People are coming from all over the world to try and join ISIS. And why would they do that? And I just want you to look at those two pictures. At the top are two girls with that symbol, the ISIS symbol, and below are what the girls looked like a few days before that. They're Austrian, they are now pregnant, and begging to come home. These kids are wrapped up in the ideology, all the stuff that I have on my slides here that we don't really have time to go through, but they're offering them something that they don't have, that they feel like maybe would be useful to them. And they are willing to cross the world. And ISIS enables it, it makes it easy for them to do that. They're also training child soldiers. This is what bothers me the most. They call them cubs of the Islamic State. Boy Scouts, they're not, okay? But they're training these children to behead, to be around blood and explosions, because they are the next generation. And they're not in school because they've closed the schools down. And so these kids are bored and they're going to go and join the party. Some of them run away because it's so horrific, but some of the stories would just scare you to death as they recruit the next generation. How do they recruit? They're very clever. Yeah, I watched a recruitment video the other day. I'm sure the government's watching me now. But oh my gosh, they're slick. They are the most slick advertisements you've ever seen, and they erase any doubt that a young teenager might have. And they give them the opportunities to come. And one of the things that I think, the British accent thing, I was listening to somebody talk about that, and they said that the British accent, using somebody with a British accent to do the beheading, says, you too, from the outside world, can come join us. It's not just Arabs, it's people from all over the world that are going to come join us. And there we go. Funding, they don't get it, they don't have to borrow. They find it. They are establishing a state. They collect taxes. They sell electricity and oil back to Syria. They raid branches of the banks in the places that they are at. They have a ton of revenue. They can afford to pay more salaries. Therefore, people leave other groups to come work for them because the salaries are higher. I'm going to move on. The Saudis are not too happy. They've been building a wall. I hear the price of cement is going up while the price of oil goes down, because they are building walls to keep them out. What is life like under it? Not good, especially for the women. The women have been, some of them collected up and sold literally as sex slaves to jihadi fighters. ISIS and the US and Europe, some people are worried that they will come over here, and as I pointed out, their goal is to engage and get rid of the Shia first. So our job, obviously, is to stop this before it moves any further. That's where they're concentrating. So what now? This is a quote that came from a hardline Jordanian Salafist after the killing. So this would be somebody that you would expect might support a group like ISIS. And he said, this killing has proven that the Islamic State are deviants from Islam and now all of Jordan. Islamists and liberals, East Bank and West Bank, are all uniting against them. Many of us hope that what happened the other day will be enough to make people realize that this can't go on. And this was a bad move. And that this will change what happens with ISIS. Now, there will always be another group, unfortunately. There's multiple groups. But this one probably took the wrong step this last time, and that's what we hope for. So that's my presentation. Sorry, it went a little fast. I'm used to 50 minutes with my students, not 20. So if you have any questions, we can take a couple of minutes of questions, and that you get to go back to work. Yes?
The Al-Qaeda group, how do they differ from the ISIS
Al-Qaeda is the germinal group. They're the original group that came up with the collapse of Iraq and the fall of Saddam Hussein. But they actually believe that ISIS is too extreme, and therefore they separated from ISIS because they did not believe, they believed that ISIS was too extreme. Now you look at Paris and you go, well, I don't understand that. But they do believe that ISIS is too extreme and that would hurt their future if they associate themselves with ISIS because they're too extreme.
But they want the same Islamic State.
Yeah, they all want the same Islamic State. It's just about how you get there. Really, that's what it is. Any other questions? Sorry, there we go. And then I'll come over here.
I have a geographic question.
Okay, I'll try. I feel like I'm on a game show here.
Has the population of the region outgrown the natural resources? And if so, is that an important factor in the unrest?
Absolutely, and that is a geographic question, a very good question. Okay, he wants me to repeat it. Basically, is the population in the Middle East outgrowing its resources, and therefore will that be an issue? And absolutely yes, we're talking a piece of geography, a piece of land where resources are limited, particularly water. And access to water is everything. And so as the populations grow, that is a problem. Now they're growing in some places and not in others. Many places have very young populations, and that's going to be a real problem in the future. So will it slow them down? Potentially it could. It's not there yet. There's so much technology to overcome geography at this point in time that as long as they have money to overcome geography with technology, they'll continue to grow, I think. And there was a question, yeah?
I've come to the conclusion that the Saudis are flooding the oil markets to undercut funding to ISIS. What do you think about that?
I think that certainly has some foundation. Saudi can survive for 1 to 2 years with the amount of money reserves that they have. And so by undercutting them, they say that ISIS is coming to actually wants oil because they don't have as much of it. And as we bomb those oil targets, that's the whole purpose of it, is to bomb those oil targets. You can't have a state without oil and money and funding. And so I think it's all related. Okay, thank you.